Hello group, Jeff here. I'm at my workstation and I've been playing with a Raspberry Pi, which is one of these devices. It's basically a computer on a board. It has 4 USB 2 slots, a 100 NIC, a wireless NIC, an ARM chip for the CPU, and it has HDMI out, power, audio out, and it's got some pins for like maker projects, which makes this little board kind of cool. I've been using one for my 3D printers for the last 2 years, and it allows me to control the prints, and I can hook a camera up to the Pi as long as I have enough power, and that would require 5 volts, 2.5 amps. Anything below that, and you risk hurting the Pi or overheating it, which it will shut itself down. You can run the Pi on 1 amp with no USB powered devices, but if you're going to have powered devices, you got to have at least 2.1 to 2.5 amps. So I will put this little guy together, and while I'm doing that, I'll kind of explain what I've done. I have a two scope setup for about 8 months of the year. For me, that would be spring to fall. It's a C14 and either the Raza 8 or a Newtonian 8 that I wheel out into the garage. Or not the garage, but the driveway. And what that allows me to do is to play with one scope and really do some serious imaging with the other scope. To do either, I have to have pretty good polar alignment because I'm taking down and I'm setting up every night. So I've got the routine down pretty good for getting the scope set up and torn down. Now I'm working on my polar alignment. And with the PoleMaster, it really cut down on my my polar lines. In fact, I've never had better polar lines than I do with the PoleMaster. But what I want is something that's going to be a little more convenient, because I have to have the software on 2 computers. I'm screwing around with USB cables and hubs, and I don't really want to do that. So I have the Pi. I have a micro SD card that's got the Ubuntu-Mate load and the PoleMaster software installed on it. I will insert that into the bottom of the Pi. I will connect an HDMI cable, my 5-watt, 2.5 amp power, and hopefully you can see that there's a red and a green LED and the Pi is booting. We'll let the Pi boot up. I'll put in the dongle for the keyboard. And here's my PoleMaster. We'll just get this ready. And right now my PoleMaster is set up on one of Anthony's dovetail brackets. And I'm 3D printed a mount that attaches to his bracket or adapter and to the PoleMaster. And I've been using this, I use this pretty much all summer this season. And I'm very happy with it, but I think I can do better. So now that the Pi is booted, what I want to do is come on, baby. I have the right dongle? Oh, where is this? There it is. Okay, we have it now. Okay, so I have the mouse, and hopefully you can see that on screen that I'm moving the mouse around and it's working. So what I'm going to do is start the PoleMaster software, and to do that you need a terminal, which in Linux world is a command prompt. And they call an administrator a super user. So I need both. I need to open a terminal, and I need a super user account to run the PoleMaster software. So I'm going to type sudo PoleMaster oops, hang on, I got it. Sudo PoleMaster. I type in my password. And there is the PoleMaster software running on the Raspberry Pi. So now I'll connect the camera. Camera is connected. And up here it says PoleMaster in parentheses as super user. Again, that's what you need so that the PoleMaster software can see the camera. And I'm connecting to the camera. You can see the camera has started. And just to prove it, I took the cap off, and you can see that I'm blinding it with the light that's off to the right here. So I'll put the cap back on. We'll get out of the camera, disconnect. I'll close the app. And I'll shut down before I shut down. The other thing that you need besides the PoleMaster software is if you're going to log into the Pi remotely, you need a remote desktop client. And I'm using NoMachine's server on the Pi. I'll show you where you can get that later. So now I'm going to shut down the Pi. And you'll know the Pi is shut down because the little green light stops blinking. And that's when you can disconnect everything. So the power, or the little green light has stopped blinking, so I've taken the power off and I removed the HDMI cable. And the reason why I want to do that is to show you how it boots in Headless, or how it boots Headless, and then I can remote into it on my Windows machine there. So I'm plugging the power back in. And hopefully you can see the LEDs have lit back up. We'll give the Pi a moment to boot. I'll start the remote desktop NoMachine's client on my Windows machine. Here it is. We'll just give the Pi a minute to boot. Then what you can do is that's only a 16 gig micro SD card on there. So that's, for me, that's enough for the OS and the Raspberry Pi and the remote desktop server. There's like 10 gigs free, so you don't need a lot of room. But if you want it to boot faster, then find the fastest micro SD card you can. So I'm going to start the Pi on the Windows machine, and it will ask me for the password. it will log in, and it's found the Raspberry Pi, and look at that. So if I still had the monitor on, you would see that the Pi, the server, saw that I logged into it, gave me a little note that says I'm logged in. So now to start the PoleMaster, I'm going to go right-click on the desktop and open a terminal. I'm going to type in sudo PoleMaster, my password, and there's the PoleMaster. I'll make it full frame. I'll start or connect to the camera. It's found the camera. I'll remove the cap, and you can see, bingo, we have a camera that's working. Now, I was able to test the software as far as I could take it without a night sky to look at, but I was able to do everything except do my final align. So I know that the software is working. I will close this, disconnect, I should say. So what I would do is, after I aligned my first scope, I would disconnect the camera but leave everything running. I'll have a battery, a small battery that will power all of this. So then I can leave the software running as I move it to the next scope. Then when I get to the next scope, all I have to do is connect to the camera again. And that will reset the software. So if I say finish, double click, I'll just click here, and you see the targets come on. I'll say success. And now it's going to ask me to pick a star. I can't do that because I don't have any stars. But you can see that the software is working. So I'll disconnect from the camera. I'll close the PoleMaster. I'll close the terminal. And what I will do now is kind of show you what you have to do on the Pi to get it to boot into a headless mode. And you would do that by going into this boot_UB folder and go down to config text and right click on it. You want to open as administrator, enter your password, and that will open a terminal screen that you can edit. And what we want to look for is the high definition video settings, which are right here. And anything with a double pound sign, anything to the right of that would be your, would describe what the function is, and then the directions, what the function does, and then the directions. So what we want to look for is anything with a single pound sign, and then if that's the function we want to remove that pound sign, and that will activate that function. So the first one that we want to look for is the HDMI_force_hot plug equals 1. We want to remove the pound sign in front of that. And the one tells us that we want to use HDMI mode even if there is no HDMI monitor is detected. Then we want to look for HDMI_drive equals 2, and that means that the normal HDMI mode sound will be sent if supported and enabled. So we want to turn that on. That when we go in headless, that allows us to hear the sound from the Pi. The next one we want to find is, I believe it's group 1, yes. HDMI underscore group equals 1, and that's the CEA. And what that does is right here, you'll see HDMI group CEA. These are the resolutions that we want to pick from. So I'm using number 16, which is 1080p, 60 hertz. And we'll activate that down here. So it's HDMI underscore mode equals 16. And this forces the Pi into 1080 60p, even though I know it can't support that. So it will start there, and it'll work down in the 1080 modes until it finds one it likes, and then that's that requester you see if you had a monitor plugged in. Some of those modes it doesn't like, and it throws up that requester. And how you know you have a 1920 by 1080 screen is if you go into System, Preferences, Hardware, Display, you'll see that it's 1920 by 1080. And I have no HDMI plugged into the Pi. We're forcing it into this mode. So once you have those set up the way you want it, you would save your file, and then the next time it boots, it will boot into those. So what I will do now is show you the excuse me. Raspberry Pi downloads. So when you go to the Raspberry Pi site, the best install for newbies would be Noobs. And what Noobs is a file that you download and then you unpack it, and then the folder that it creates, everything in that folder you would drag to a micro SD card that is clean. So you would want to make sure there's no extra partitions on it, that there's a single partition that's formatted FAT32, and you would drag those files onto that micro SD card. But in my case, the version that Ubuntu-Mate that's on this version of Noobs doesn't work as well as the version that I installed. And I installed Pinn, P-I-N-N, for Raspberry Pi. And what this version is an enhanced version of Noobs that has a perfect Ubuntu-Mate install that works excellent with the PoleMaster. So you would download this, you do the same thing, you would unpack it, the folder that it creates, you would go in and drag all the files to your micro SD card, and then you would put that micro SD card into your Pi and then boot the Pi. I will take you to NoMachine. NoMachine is the client, server and client that I'm using. They have one for the Pi right here. You want that one, and then if you're on Windows, you want this for your client side, and if you're on the Mac, you want the Mac side. So that's nomachines.com. The other thing that you want to do is you want to go to the QHY site to get the PoleMaster software. Go to products, whoops, sorry, PoleMaster. And then you would go, once you're on the PoleMaster section of their site, you would go up to the top and click Downloads. And in User Manual, you'll see something that says PoleMaster for PRI, Raspberry Pi in parentheses, Manual. You want to select that. And this gives you the instructions on how to set your Pi up. So what I recommend is that you skip 1, the image burning. You skip 1.2. You skip 1.3. Because we're using the pin version of Noobs and not the Raspberry Pi version of Noobs. So after the Raspberry Pi does its thing, it'll go into this configuration. So you would want to pick English. If you have a wireless network, you'd want to pick your network that you're going to use. If you're going to remote into it, you want to pick the wireless network that you're going to use to remote into the Pi with. So you have to think, if you're outside, do you have enough range? Your time zone, the keyboard layout, and this screen is the most important. This is where you set up your username and your password, and this little area right here, this checkbox, log in automatically, you want to check that. And that will skip the login screen and go directly to the desktop. The Pi will still be protected with the password, username and password. It's just for the boot, it skips it. And you need that to boot in to the Pi if you're going to remote desktop and headless. Otherwise, if you didn't click that check, it would just hang at the until it got the password. And when you're in headless mode, there's no way to enter the password. Then you would go to step number 2 here, and that's installing the QHY CCD SDK. And you would download this, and I would use the Pi to do this, because then it will go into the Pi. It will download it onto the Pi using their browser, the Pi browser. And I would download this number 3 the same way onto the Pi, and then it's easier to install instead of trying to move the thing. You know, download it on your PC and then move it to the Pi. Just download it right onto the Pi using the Pi's built-in browser. And then you just follow the instructions for changing a couple of, or adding a couple of lines of text to a file. And then it shows you how to check to see if the camera is working, and then how to start the software. So that's on the Ubuntu-Mate load. And after you get this done, then you would load that NoMachines. I would go to NoMachines from the Pi and download the Pi software for NoMachines, then install it. And then I will show you the little battery I want to get. I'd show you today, but the battery isn't coming in until this Friday. I just ordered it. So what I do is Goal Zero always has stuff that's open boxed. So I just type in open box into the search term, and you'll find their section, their open box section right here. And then down at the bottom, this Venture 30 power bank is what I want. The reason why I want it is if we go down here to specs, you'll see that it says USB port output 5 volt up to 2.4 amps, 12 watt max. That is plenty of power to run the PoleMaster from the Raspberry Pi on this battery. And just to give you an idea of how big this battery is, that's a GoPro right here. That's a GoPro, that's a GoPro. This is the Pi, that's the GoPro. my battery will be just a little bit bigger than the Pi. So it's going to be a very nice little package. You can see that, I'll disconnect the camera here, that this mount is just about the same size as Anthony's plate, or not plate, but as a dovetail adapter. Just a tiny bit smaller in length. Okay, so let's put it up against the back side here, so that'll show you that there's maybe a 1/2 inch. So I'm saying the battery will be just a little bit wider and probably just a tickle longer. So it's going to be a perfect match. Match made in heaven, as they said, from a guy that was never married. So this is my my project to hopefully make my polar lines go a little smoother. I hope you guys got some ideas out of it. If you want to know a little more information, you know how to get a hold of me. When I get my mount done, what I'll do is I'll throw a picture of it up on the site where the post is located for this video, and then you can see how it looks once I've got everything all made and finalized. So that's it for now. We'll catch you in the group.